of got it. So in terms of questions then, you will find it's at the top of mine because I'm in presenter mode, but I think your bar should be at the bottom, but wherever your toolbar is, there you can see the chat function. Please do put your questions into the function. Basically, because we're in the wonderful position today of having 59 participants now we're up to. So if you put them in there, we'll try and group the questions as we go along. And any questions that we don't manage to cover today, please just get them in there. We know how important this is for you in terms of your programme being successful, but also in terms of for the students as well. And we will get back to you with answers, thoughts. A little bit of housekeeping. Today, unlike usual fashion, those of you that know me from networks, I am going to ask you to put your microphones off, to switch your cameras off whilst we're in this main meeting room. And basically that's just because of numbers, but also it will assist with our connectivity. We've already mentioned the questions in the toolbar. But if you select the to all button or attendees, then everybody can see what the question that you've asked, but also come in on the back of that. And then we've also said that we're going to record and we're going to do a live transcript because that's what you've asked for. So there's the agenda and there's the running order for you. We've done introductions, but I just wanted to you to have a look at that and where people are from and the input as well. And there's a little bit of context there about the agenda in terms of, we're just going to revisit the obligatory slide for a couple of minutes only. Running through to case study support, and you'll see those breaks in there as well, and finishing no later than 12 noon. And this session is a mix of information giving, but also lots there about sharing, exploring, for you to take away what you need to maximise the curriculum, the digital curriculum, in respect of the industry placement. Now, very deliberately here, I've gone back to the original T-level DFE T-level slide there. So this is the very original one from those of you that adopted in the early days a couple of years ago. So in terms of your T-level programme, our focus today is on how to maximise the opportunity for digital. So we're looking at bottom left-hand corner, that's what we're referring to. So what they will need for the routes therefore, it's that bit to make it interesting, exciting, how important that T-level industry placement is for combining that with the rest of the programme. So although we will be looking at, and our delivery conversation will be looking at core occupational specialism and additional, no, not additional requirements for digital, but we will be looking at those. Our focus is on that bottom left-hand corner, what the curriculum looks like, English and maths contextualised. So we're now refocusing those requirements in terms of contextualisation because of the announcement in November, mid-November, the exit requirements now not being required in terms of level 2. Okay, so it's all about that bottom left-hand corner. So I'm now going to invite Debbie to share a practitioner's view. I'm driving the slides, so Debbie, that gives you a fab opportunity to say next one, please. And I'm just going to go onto mute for a moment. Okay, Debbie, over to you.
So good morning again, everyone. So a little bit about myself. I've just had a look through the names. Actually, some of you may sort of know me from provider forums and external agencies that I work with as well. So I am the digital lead at Fareham College. I'm also the course leader for the T-levels that we deliver. So the digital production, design and development, we're now on our second year. So we're now on to the occupational specialism. And we also this year we're doing the digital support services. I'm also I'm on the design team for the provider validation panel and standards for Pearson, so very much involved with them. And I'm also a reviewer and a writer for NCFE, and I'm currently reviewing the book that is due to come out sometime early next year for the digital production, design, development and the digital support services. So hello everyone, that's me. Next slide please. Okay, so this is just a run through. I thought this would be quite useful, so I'm just going to talk to you about the curriculum delivery, collaboration with employers, hopefully give you some tips and tricks and also the challenges. So I'll give you an honest view on how to actually possibly overcome them. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the T-level curriculum delivery, so what we do is we sat down. This almost seems like 2 years ago now. It's all where we first did the Pearson one. It's very different, and it's very different from the BTEC, as you probably, most of you will know, because it's not unitized, and if you try to unitize it, it just doesn't work. So we looked at the delivery. So you've got, in the first year, you've got the 2 core papers for the digital, and obviously they sit alongside the A-level papers, and then you've got the small sort of project, approximately 20 hours plus for and so that's your 3 exams, and then and then we've got in year 2 the occupational specialism, which is considered more, so that's like the main project. So how do we set out looking at the curriculum and looking at, you know, what we could do? So first of all, I think it's really important to know that we have to upskill. It is different. The good thing about this is that it does align with employers. I particularly like it because actually employers love it. This is what employers want, and you know, they feel it matches with what they're trying to achieve. So all are so currently I have 14 on year 2. So all of them are actually on current work placement at the moment, the software development. With software development, so they're actually out on placement. I think what I'm going to do in a moment as well, I've got a link for you, which some of you will have, and some of you, it's basically the government guidelines, and it is really useful for industrial placement. There's several on there, but I use that guideline, and in fact the team use it to sort of plan out what we're going to be doing with the actual employers from the offset. It's really important, especially if you're doing the software development and you've placed them in somewhere that actually it's digital, but it's sort of like more network infrastructure, then you need to look at a second placement, because that's not in the government guidelines. So I will pop that in the chat in a moment for everyone. So what we did was, it needs a team of people that, you know, we reached out to those within the know, and so our senior management team, our senior leadership team, we sort of like often have, you know, lots of sort of like conversations with them of the direction, and also how they can help, because they will have links to the, you know, employment community as well. So that was quite, it's not alone. It's not, and I always said this, it's not a journey that's alone, you know, and you're sort of like, it's just in your department. It's really important to actually look at it across college as well, because so what will help the students is that if they have to know the sector. So I think last year when they did the tags, it was the financial sector. This year, I think on the mocks they're doing, it's food and beverage. So it's, and then I think it's fitness as well. There's health and fitness. So what's really important is that we kind of get the students involved in little sort of like mini projects with other departments, so they learn about the sector, because they do have that pre-release. But I think that during the year, it's really important to kind of have that, you know, collaboration. And I know that some colleges have been doing that, but it's really anybody in FE, it's a great idea. And I think, you know, when we're doing the BTEC, we have these great ideas, but we're just, you know, it's just so busy, and you're hitting the ground running. So I think the T-level allows you to be able to do it. Oh, if there's any chat, I'll just come to the end of this, and then I'll take questions. So engaging the employer, we ask for masterclasses. The employers wrote the qualifications, or they had that input. So it's really good. We reached out, asked, and like I say, we used our senior leadership team, and you know, we asked for contacts. I then joined forums as well, so digital forums, and it's really useful because actually companies do want to help, and they'll come in, and even if, you know, so we looked at like the curriculum, and then, you know, we said, look, this would be really good. You can't be a specialist as a lecturer, you can't be a specialist in everything, and you know, it's really good to have that up-to-date information, and that helps. So how did I start on the curriculum? How did I start? So what I do is I do projects as well as doing the theory. So the content sort of areas, or the on both of the digital, but I put projects in. So if it's NCFE, so it's digital support, we actually have a Cisco lecturer that comes in each week for our students, but we put mini projects, and then in those projects what we do is we invite the employers before they go out. So we don't actually we don't send anyone out at, you know, for about 3 months, sometimes depending on the student, but it's roughly, we kind of give them about 10 weeks, that sort of like to have a specialist sort of employment lecturer. So I don't do it myself. It will be so we've got Sarah that does an hour a week, and she gets their CVs and interviews and everything up together, and then what we do is we invite the employers in to have a look at their project, and usually that's remote as well, so it gets the students used to seeing employers. And so I've put non-unitized. Yeah, it's really important to look at it a different way. So look at it as projects, which is quite nice. Have the links with the employers as well. The resources there are, and I know Helen's going to talk about this later, but on the BCS site, there's some really good resources for each of the digital sort of like areas as well. NCFE, we've actually we've got their free resources, but we have actually paid as well, and I think it's worth sort of paying for their content sort of like areas as well. And Pearson's, so we've got Pearson's resources, and we've adapted them as well. So any questions before I go on?
I'm looking in the chat there. A couple of things that you might be really interested in, if you want to put any questions in the chat. If not, we can come back to it. So what I picked up there, Debbie, was the fact that your project delivery, and I don't know if James will be touching on this later with the curriculum, but the employment lecturers actually supporting that project delivery. And I know you've particularly mentioned Cisco there. So at this moment, before we move on, is there anybody that wants to cover anything off? We can pick up something in the chat if people don't want to, and hands up.
I've just put the government T-level industry placement delivery guidance. that is really useful, I have to say. We use it, and it's the do's and don'ts, and it's probably, you know, it's quite a good idea. I've got the digital one as well, which I'll put in the chat as well, that kind of like tells you for each of the digital, which I thought will be quite useful. So I'll put that in the chat later as well. Yeah,
okay. That's great, Debbie, because we could I'll come back to the guidance at the end, just before we go. So I've got nothing in the chat at the moment. Please do, if you think of things as we go along, please do raise them and we can address them.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So how to engage with employers in the curriculum design and delivery. So I, as part of the technical team, the technical team, we go out. So we have a business plus department that actually gets the industrial placements for us. But it's really important for us on the technical team that we go out to make sure this is before we kind of sign the students, just really to see how the employer is supporting, what kind of work, and will it actually match what they're doing, because it's all in line with the, you know, the government guidance as well. One of the things that the employers mentioned is that one of their biggest costs, and that's like human resource costs, is that this is pre-T-level, is that before the T-level, they would spend a lot of time, just especially on digital, with the student, because they couldn't send an email. They struggled with the spellings, or they didn't check the spellings, or they couldn't communicate, something really simple. So hence, you know, we had the opportunity to change our, you know, to look at the model of the T-level, and we were able to put like do this as an hour a week. So all we have Sarah comes in an hour a week, and it is really beneficial, and it has, you know, like I say, all our students on the sort of the year 2 placement, and at the moment we've got 21 students on the for the first years, and they are currently being placed and going through interviews now. So we're currently going through that, and they'll be out on their block weeks in January. So I thought that was, I gathered some information, and I thought that was quite, you know, interesting to understand what the employers sort of wanted. So how do we engage? So we do the master classes. So I have a look, and I sort of like especially on the year 2s, I'm doing master classes for APIs. We're doing PHP, we're doing an SQL as well, and it's sort of like usually they come in as a one-off. But I also invite some of the programmers to come and do sort of like 8 weeks, because on the curriculum for Python on the first year, you've got the libraries, the Tkinter, the Matplotlib. So you've got to make sure that they are competent in doing that. And it's really nice to have not just the lecturers delivering. It's really nice to bring it in for the master classes as well. So that certainly does work.
I'm going to interrupt because we've got a couple of questions there around learner recruitment for DPDD. So yeah, and how did you manage to do that?
Okay.
So that one, and then there's another question around sourcing placements, the approach to sourcing industry placements in your institution as a whole. So first one, recruitment, second one, sourcing placements.
Okay, I've got one here as well that found it difficult to get numbers on the digital production, design and development. So we have a specialist department. I think this is the key is our specialist department. So we have so our student support, which I can't think of the name at the moment, there's a proper name for it, I can't think of it at the moment. I think it's the outreach team. So the outreach team go into assemblies. So what you're competing with the A-levels, you're competing with the A-levels that will sit alongside, so that's where they're sit, but also the additional is that they will get obviously the work experience, the industrial placement. I'm not going to say work experience because it's an industry placement. So last night we had, this is the shift, it has taken us 12 months. But last night, so we run the games development course, which is very popular. Students it's only one route, the game development, it's uni, that's it. And it's very creative. So it's almost like a boutique course. But the digital production will give you, so our skills in the first year, we do, I do web development, Python, C as well. So I put quite a bit of coding in there. And last night we had an intro, just like an intro session. And instead of, so there's 14, and usually last year we got 1 or 2 on T level. This year we had 12. And then 2 on UAL. So that shift is changing, and it is, you know, thanks to the behind the scenes, we've got our outreach team going in, just as the other colleges have with their A-levels and promoting that, they're going in. So we've spent quite a lot of time with the outreach team saying that, you know, this is what we'd like, and they go into the assemblies. We've also hosted parents as well, parents coming in, because they're your key. Your key is get the parents in, because at 16, 17 years old, the student will rock up on sign in with their, you know, their 4, 5s grades, and they'll want to do game development. But is that going to be, you know, is that what they want? Do they really want to go to uni? And that's their only choice. So parents are the key. Invite parents in. So what we do with our first year, we do a showcase. So at the end, so last year, at the end of the year, we did a showcase for local employers. We invited our MPs, and we're also parents as well. And we did a mini sort of like, and we got some of our employers to talk as well at the parent event. It was very successful, hence our numbers. So, you know, I am surprised that, you know, you're finding it hard on the digital production, because that is the strength. It's the network infrastructure, which is, you know, which is fantastic. And it's up there, and there's so many. There's a skill set, and that's the T level. You come with a skill set, and that's, you know, because what 16-year-old, or it'd be very, you know, it's a minority that will know exactly what they want. They will know the careers. Some of them, you know, have not even heard of some of the careers that are out there for the digital kind of, you know, hub. I've got one of my second years, well, actually 2. So 2 of my second years, one of them's going to read animation. But you see, we don't teach animation on the digital production, but we've got transferable skills. And what we did, we actually, that was her placement. So she's looking at that. She's doing some coding as well, but she's also for an animation firm. And then she's going to read that at university. And another one of my students is doing digital marketing. So there, we put WordPress in when we were showcasing. So there's lots of things, kind of like, you know, we're always trying to think of what we can do to maximize, you know, how useful this is. Social media, we reach out to, you know, like I say, to social media. We ask if there's any employers that can come in and help, and you know, they're usually quite proactive. Okay.
I know this is a theme that we're going to that's going to run throughout, and that's in terms of when the industry placement should take place, and the answer is probably it depends. But we've got a question about the position of industry placement year 1, year 2.
Yeah, well, okay, here's the tip. Well, the government recommend. So in those guidelines, government recommend do not send them out straight away. They need to have, so like I say, we do about 3 languages. We hit the ground running with 3 coding languages. And then for network infrastructure, we do a lot of, like, you know, the building, the support, and then
looking at. So we do quite a bit of practical. So we don't send them out. We look at what the guidelines are saying, and they recommend not to send them out straight away. So we are trying to do top heavy in year 1, because year 2, huge project. I can, you know, I cannot tell you, you know, it's a short time, because certainly for the production design in year 2, that it's 11 weeks of exams. And 11 weeks, they start in February. So you have, that's why I put web development in year 1, because trying to teach web development in 4 months, the answer is no. So so we put quite a bit in year 1, and then year 2 is very practical, and they're bringing their skills in, and then we're upskilling them as well. So we're introducing them to things like academic papers that they've got to read and they've got to put in. So year 1, yes, we do. We call it a mop-up. So what we usually do is before their exam, so either you can do first week of December or January, I do 2 weeks. Then I do one in April. So we do about 4 weeks. And then in the summer, if someone hasn't been placed, we do a couple of weeks in the summer. So when they're going on to year 2, we look at about that they've done at least 100 hours. Okay.
So Debbie, block or linear? I know what the community say. The community say, let's see if Debbie employs this practice as well. But lots of people say that in terms of digital, that employers prefer block placement, so that the students can get something done, you know, sort of if they're working on a particular app or something like that. But Debbie, we've got a question around interest in what you do in terms of, yeah, block or...
Do both. So we're flexible on both. And the reason being, you're absolutely right. Smaller companies, smaller companies actually quite like the support every week, but we allow that to be flexible. So, you know, I have, so if I can look at my 14 year 2s, all of them are going out 1 day a week. But we offer that, and the way I look at it is, but there's quite some small companies there, and the reason what we say is, if you know them, you can give them something small every week, and they build up. So when they do the block week, they're of use to you. So for instance, 4 of our students at the same placement, and they've just done some digital transformation for the company, and so basically they were doing room bookings manually, spreadsheet. There are a lot of companies still out there, by the way, doing the manual processes. So our students came along. So I'd already put that in as a project anyway. So they already knew how to do it. And actually, we did some Arduino kits as well, like for a traffic light system. So what they did was they did the booking system, and then they've actually implemented the traffic light system into it as well. So, it works for both. Some companies do not want 1 day a week, but as I usually explain, look, why don't you just try, and you know, it builds up, so it won't be too much of your time when you've got the 2 weeks. They'll be there, they'll know the ethos of the company, and it will just be that's how I sell it anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose it might be different according to which OS that you're doing. So whether those students are doing support service DSS, or whether they're doing business services, the data. So I think that will be dependent, won't it, upon specialism. Debbie, we know that you introduced DD first and then moved on to DSS. So we've got a question around supporting introduction of digital support services.
Mm-hmm.
If you could speak a little bit, I know it's newer for you, that one.
Yeah, so the digital support services, so they are at the moment, we're just in the, do you know, they seem to be shyer, our students, fantastic, but they seem, so I haven't put them out, and like I say, We do it on an individual basis, but we haven't put them out yet. So they will be going out in January. They all have to have an interview, and some of them have, not been successful, so they go on to the next interview, and they do the digital support. So they go on to the first line. So that will be, helping. And actually, doing 1 day a week is fine for digital support. Because when they do come a block week, they've got the big projects to do, like, it could be stripping down the PC or wiping the PCs. And then sort of like for the network infrastructure, we find that if the student, we're going to get them to go out 1 day a week, it's much better. But there's smaller companies as well that we tend to use rather than the larger companies, because the large companies sometimes outsource, and because they outsource, it's just harder for us to go into that company. So what we do is we look at smaller companies where they can be of help, like I say, wiping the PCs, updating the PCs, and that all comes under the digital support. I've got a question here, actually. How does your masterclass help engage with the employers? So we reach out to employers. Say, for instance, certainly for our year 2, we've got our specialist lecturers working on PHP and SQL. But we reached out to a large company and said, look, are you working on any of these projects? They said, oh yeah, we do it all the time. Do you want to come and give us a masterclass? Yeah, sure. And by the way, did you know we do, after the 2 years, they can come and do higher apprenticeship with us. Oh, can they? Okay. So it's worth it. It's absolutely worth engaging with employers, because they do have those specialist skills there. They actually, had a heavy input on writing the materials across sort of like digital.
Yeah, okay. So, and I'm going to ask James to pick up the ESP and how that's validated with employers, in their session. James, please, because I know there's been a couple of questions around that. And then Debbie, there's lots of, can you tell us more about this celebration event? So
yeah, sure. Well, I've got one here that says Business Plus and external company. No, our Business Plus is, so basically they're the apprenticeship team, and they do the apprenticeships with the work experience. So what we're going to be doing as well, we collaborate with them on the higher apprenticeships, because what you want is your college to grow and look at progression. So certainly when you're looking at like the BTECs and the UALs, there's always been, where are they progressing to? But with the T-level, because most of the employers have tried before they buy, we then say, come to a higher apprenticeship. Look, we do this already. So our Business Plus team, so our apprenticeship team, we have like pockets of people sort of like supporting us, and it really it is so helpful, because you can't just do it yourself. I mean, your lecturer's got to be upskilled. It's huge, and there's a lot of support out there. There's huge amounts of support with external agencies, so yeah, take up any offer there is for upskilling and helping and etc. Okay, so the showcase, I really enjoyed the showcase, actually, because employers were blown away. And I'll tell you what they were blown away with, not just the technical skills, but how the students articulated themselves. It's a different breed. We're changing, we're supporting employers more, and they are they're now coming to go, oh, actually, can we have another T-level, or we'd like to, especially the smaller companies, and they're helping. So I've got one company, started with one, he's now got 5, and what he's done is his web developer comes comes and supports 2 of the students that have specialized in web development, and what he's actually teaching them. So the web developer is teaching them sort of like industry, so they'll be able to support them, and then they've offered them higher apprenticeships already. So it really does lend itself. It's a different qualification. It's one that employers love. Providers, it's a little bit, well, it's the unknown, isn't it? And no one really likes change. Yeah, it's a bit daunting. But like I say, employers love it. So the showcase was brilliant because then we got the business and we got hospitality. So we got them to do the catering. We got the business to organise it. So we did other departments sort of like helped us. And then organised it. And so then the students, because they've been doing the projects from the ground running, it was normal, second nature for them to talk. It was, they talk so much that, it just doesn't seem like a very nervous student that just wants to, have the ground open up. T-levels are, have really, really helped them. And that goes throughout digital, so some of the companies that deal with like the network infrastructure and that, they came as well, and we're talking to them this year, ready for our students to go out. What I've got a question here.
Standardising the IP experience. Gary, we'll have a look at the guidance that will help in that standardisation. But really interested, Debbie, from your point of view, in that smaller companies vary, what sort of provision and how do you make sure that your students get that same quality provision? Right.
Our technical team, we go out and because you can't, because the business plus are there to set it up, but so we build that into the curriculum. The technical team go out because you're absolutely right. It has to. Reading the guidelines, very clear. The government have made it crystal clear. If they're not doing network infrastructure, or they're not doing digital support, or they're not doing software development, you can't put it forward. So those guidelines are like, it's like a Bible to me. You have to, like I say, I will put the other one in the chat as well.
And also, I just want to acknowledge here the recent flexibilities, and Debbie and I talked about this on Friday, actually. And just to say, that's only applicable to wave 1 and wave 2, that 40 and 25%. So there was a question around some interest on how you've approached that.
Yeah, do you know what? You're the 40% of the hours, wow. Yeah, I think it's 25% this year. Last year it was 40%, but they cannot work from home. So it has to be sort of in college, and I was sort of with the Department of Education when they were sort of making this sort of like happening, going back to the sort of like the minister at the time, and they did come up with the idea, well, look, we can't have them at home because actually some students might be disadvantaged, might not have the equipment, but that college does, so we do provide that. So what we did was, it is difficult, and I do understand that employers are moving towards a blended working. So this is what we did, was they don't know how great the student is. No one is. You could say how our students are brilliant, they code all the time, or they're looking at networking, they're doing a Cisco. You can tell them, but it really so when they came out 1 day a week and then they slowly started doing some things, that's when the employers go, hang on. And you are right, they have a blended approach. But one of our employers that employs 4 of our students has said, you know what, we need to make this work. How can we make this work? So they do come into the office 1 day a week, and then on block weeks they will facilitate, because it's not all the time, it's not 100%. And actually what they're seeing is a return, because it's helping them. The T-level students, whatever their skill is, will be able to support the employer. So as well as them employers supporting us, actually we are supporting the employer. It's helping them, it's building their future. So they don't, you know, it's because what you remember, especially on the digital side, on the software development, it's full stack development in year 2. So that means it's designing and developing the front end and the back end. Full stack developer. So one of our employers is going to employ a full stack developer, but what I've actually recommended alongside have our T-level. So he'll learn from the full stack developer, and then after year 2, he'll then do a higher apprenticeship if he wants, if that's, you know, because these are small, like I say, most of them are small companies. And then, you know, and then they've got another full stack developer, and that's how kind of, you know, it helps the employer and it helps us. So I think it's how you sell it, if that makes sense. But yes,
last one before we move on, Debbie. Is
yeah.
that okay? Yeah, and I know there are some other questions, but maybe Debbie can take those sort of like in the chat later. EHCP. So you're, you know, sort of, have you managed to find those students that have got a plan, placements? I don't know what your experience is at Fareham.
Sorry, what do you mean, Romy? Sorry, say again.
Difficulty finding those students with an EHCP, so health and, you know, sort of your SEND students, yeah, with plans.
Wow, yes, we do. So again, we have a couple that are out on placement, and they have, you know, they have the EHCP. So, you know, as a tutor, I touch base with them every week. I make sure they're supported. And yes, you know, there are exceptions in the guidelines. There are exceptions, but ours have gone out. And, you know, everything's been fine at the moment. And, you know, we had one student and it was for his motor skills, but very good at programming, and you'd find the employers are, you know, they're going to have, you know, they want to see what the HP plan, so how they could support them. So yeah, we don't have any problems at the moment. I just got one more from Stephen that he's basically said, can I ask about the employer set project on digital production? On Pearson page, a spec page 42, it says the project is set by Pearson. Yes, it's external, but it was written by, let me tell you, these were written, you know, they had the input by employers, but yes, they are, because they get externally marked as well, and that goes for NCFE as well. So they are externally marked. So yeah, the good thing with, and I'm sure Pearson, in fact I know Pearson's are moving into this, but the NCFE on the actual core papers, you have a choice when you register. You have a choice to do it either online or manual. With Pearson's, it's the same as the A-level papers at the moment, but you can apply if your student has an EHCP, you can apply for it to be online. But I think it's students aren't used to manually writing there. So I started at the moment, I've already started on the core papers. I give them, so I say, right, so the root core for NCFE, I give them a selection of mock questions, and I do the same for digital production, and then I go through how they should be articulating their answers. This isn't, but you do find they don't bring it to the scenario. They do it generally, or they do it as if they're at school, and that's not what it's about. So they have to pitch it at, you know, at A level throughout digital. So it doesn't matter what you're delivering, they have to pitch it at A level. I do have, just to let everyone know, and this is, so I do higher maths, which actually I do core maths, not myself, but again, another, and we do 2 hours a week, and they can go in for their exam. That helps them on problem solving. It does, if you've got distinction, I think it's about 30 UCAS points. Now, do universities recognise core? Well, universities, they are changing, because they're getting more of an understanding. So some of the Russell groups, you know, have shut their door, but now they are, there's there's a crack in it now, and they're opening them, and we've got, you know, say for instance, one of my students is going to Warwick, which I believe is a Russell group, and he's got his core, his distinction, and they've said, right, we'll do entry. So you'll have, it looks like you have, you've got our requirements. So what we'll do is we'll do entry exam on the maths, and if you fit, you can, when you pass, you will be successful. So, you know, this is new. This will be new for the next couple of years, but it is moving. I can tell you it's moving in the right direction, especially since COVID. There's more companies coming on the digital kind of, you know, environment. So it's just how it's managed. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So can I move us on?
Yeah, please.
That's brilliant.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, so
challenges. I'll be very quick on this one. Challenges, mindset. Biggest challenge is staff, because you're asking staff to, so some might be on the BTEC 2016, but if you're like us, we didn't move from the 2010 spec, and we liked it. We hung on to that because we really like that. So it was a little bit of a shock when we went over to, obviously, so we just bypassed 2016 specifications. So if you've done 2016, it's not too much of a transition. The NCFE, we did do a sub-diploma again. It's much more, there's much more practical, it's much more on the T level side, but it's the mindset of the staff. We're very busy as lecturers, and you know, I obviously don't need to tell you, and trying to say to staff, do you know what, you've got to upskill, and by the way, it's going to be exams, it's going to be like your A levels. It's a huge change, but like I say, you know, look at the support that's around. There's so much support. Use that support. And yeah, industry placements, they are a challenge, but we sat down and thought, what can we do differently? How can we do this? So it is having a team and bouncing ideas in other departments as well. So yeah, the upskilling staff, but also look at, we don't do everything. One lecturer does not fit all. And I know that, you know, maybe that's challenged, but it's something I would look at the future. We do specialists. So I do, you know, a specialist area, but then I do a bit of everything as the course leader and tutor. I'll then come in and I'll be the one to give them the mocks, the whole mock, and then map that. So progression. Look at the variety that you've actually got. If they got industry placement, is try before you buy. That's our tagline. Universities will accept them. Higher education. So if you have a provision at your college, you know, make sure you're planning that now. So you're putting the seed in the employer. Wow, higher apprenticeship. There you go. Or direct employment. And that's, you know, that's up to it. So that's it. Any questions? I hope that's been useful anyway. I hope that has been useful. I'm happy to take any, you know, questions or any contact details.
Yeah, there's a couple in the chat. Yeah, there's a couple in the chat, Debbie. But
okay.
just to say to everybody, yes, Debbie will pick those up in the chat. Brilliant input there. Fabulous interaction with yourselves as delegates. So thank you so much for keeping that sort of like that bouncy and fast paced. And yes, I agree with this is fantastic. Well done, Fareham.
Yeah, and I have to say, well done to our
oh, sorry.
Well done to our team. You know, everybody's involved. Our senior leadership team, they're always encouraging, and you will find that they will be as well. You've just got to reach out and say, give me some help, what can you do? Yeah, so they are pretty awesome. Okay, thank you. I'll put that in the chat as well. I've got another link that will help everyone. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to now move on to Helen, who lots of you know, to tell us about the support and the scheme Get Ahead, Get Recognised. Helen, I'm here to run your slides, and hopefully I won't press the mouse like I did there in multiple succession there. So Helen, please do join us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Romy. It's what I wanted to talk about is the support that BCS are offering to all digital T-level providers. I know some of you will know about this, and as a special ask I've got for you who are already engaged towards the end of my presentation, but I thought it'd be useful just to give a quick background for those of you who haven't yet engaged, and also to remind people there's actually a lot more in the offer than some people might be using some parts of the offer, like the resources, but maybe haven't taken up other aspects of it. So I want to talk through what the programme actually offers you, and also, as I say, asking for your help for those of you who are already engaged. So if we could have the next slide, please, Romy. There should be a next slide. Right, so just by way of background, just to explain what this is a new support programme being developed by BCS. It's being funded by the Gatsby Charitable Foundation as part of their work about promoting and raising the profile of people at technician level across, particularly across STEM subjects. This is all about helping digital T-level students not just have a successful T-level, but really on their route towards professional recognition. So it's helping providers build industry insight, professional behaviours into their delivery, and helping students move towards becoming a recognised digital professional in the workplace. So all the costs of this are being covered by Gatsby for all of you folks. So it's all the 2020 and the 2021 providers. So everything I'm talking about is completely free of charge to you as providers. So we have the next slide. If I just explain actually what it is. So what do students get? Well, any student from a registered provider gets a 4-year engagement package from BCS. So we'll be supporting them and engaged with them, not just during their T-level, but for the critical couple of years when they move on, whether that's to university or an apprenticeship or into direct employment. So we have a student hub, we have newsletters, we have competitions for students. So we're developing that resource to keep that engagement with those students, getting them off to the best possible start. On completion of their T-level, any digital T-level student gets free part RITTech recognition. Now, for those of you who don't know what RITTech is, and it's an awful mouthful, I have to say, that is the professional standard for people working in a technician level role in any digital occupation, whether that's a software role, digital marketing, data. It recognises not just your technical competencies, but also that you're working to professional standards and demonstrating professional behaviours. So anyone who completes a T-level with a registered provider gets automatic free recognition, part recognition, and then once they've had a year or two in employment or with additional experience, they can apply for free full registration. And that means at that stage, they can start using letters after their name and can say that they're part of the RITTech community working to recognise professional standards. So the benefits for them, it really helps them on those first steps towards professional recognition and practical support to succeed in placement and when they move into employment. So there's benefits, we hope, there for your students. For providers, if we could have the next slide, please. Again, for those of you who don't know, what the offer is to providers. Over the last couple of years, we've mapped all the resources that are out there anyway, and we've mapped it to the specification for the 3 different T-levels. There's nearly 3,000 different resources there. So if you're looking for materials to help you deliver a particular aspect of the programme, that's a start point, and obviously saves time and money hunting around to see what's out there. We also have been developing new resources designed by employers to support your delivery. And this is all about trying to just add value over the mainstream delivery. It's about showing the application of knowledge and skills in the workplace. So there's masterclasses, there's webinars, there's employer set projects that you can use as you see fit in terms of enhancing your delivery. Any registered provider can have 1 member of staff with free BCS membership and free RITTech registration. And that really helps you really engage with local BCS members, access CPD resources, keep up to date with research in terms of what's happening in the industry and the research that BCS do. And you've also got the opportunity to get your T-level programme accredited by BCS, which means you can use the BCS logo on your materials. You'll be an educational affiliate. And again, that helps in terms of credibility with local employers and with parents, them showing that you're delivering to professional standards. So hopefully there are benefits of being involved with the professional body, access to resources for your tutors, and obviously support for your students to professional recognition. In terms of where we are now, if we move on to the next slide, the programme started in September 2020, so we had the basics in place when the first cohort of T-level students started. And at the moment, we've got 61 providers registered, 124 provider staff registered, 40 providers got their students registered with us, and we've now got just under 600 students registered. So we've got quite high levels of registration, but we're beginning to feel that engagement's quite low. And the problem we've got at the moment is because we're all stuck in these COVID circumstances, we don't really know how things are going. We need to hear a lot more about what's working, what's not working, what you want to see us do, because everything that we're doing, we're trying to do to help you folks, but we need those feedback loops. And obviously we haven't been able to get out and about on the road to come and visit you to get that insight. So the ask really for those of you who are engaged is we really need your help in getting feedback so we know what's working, what's not working, which resources are liked, what we need to do differently. In terms of the current challenges we've set ourselves, if we can look at the next slide, we have an employer steering group, and that involves employers such as IBM, Fujitsu, Cisco, Lloyds Banking Group, National Highways, as well as a number of SMEs. And again, we're always looking for more employers to join the steering group. And I have to say the level of commitment from those employers to looking at what we can do to support you folks, as Debbie was saying, the employers are really committed to try and make T-levels work and really want to hear from you about what else we can be doing to help you. But they've set 4 priorities for us for the next year. One is engagement. How can we really better engage with you folks at the delivery end to really help us understand what we can do to help? We really want to help you around industry placements. We're not here to help you source placements, but what else can we do to get the message out to other employers to help spread the learning there? How do we develop the resources to best support you in those areas? And also, as we've now got students in their second year, really making sure that transition of students from their T-level into whatever their next stage is, how do we make that work well for students, and we maintain that engagement with them and understand what their challenges are at the next stage of their career. So if we have a look at the next slide, I think there's a sort of a really important window of opportunity for us that over the next 6 months, we will be continuing to develop the offer. We'll be continuing to develop it after that. But as I say, we really need your input. The programme is currently free of charge. So if you're not registered, please register with us, explore what's available. You've got nothing to lose. But then also let us know what you think. What's not working that we're doing? What would you like to see more of? What else can we do? And if you are already engaged, please let us know what you think of it. How could it better meet your needs? What challenges have you got coming up? It was useful hearing what Debbie had got to say there. But what else could we support you with? There's a sort of win-win for everybody involved if we can really make this work. So that's really my ask. And if we just move to the next slide, for those of you who aren't registered, that link there will show you how to register for the programme. And if you are already registered, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Obviously, we may have a bit of chance for a bit of feedback now, but do email me, fix a call with me, and where possible, I'd love to come out and talk to you and, you know, actually understand how things are going. But that's obviously not as easy as it could have been over the last 12 months, but I know we all know that. So that was just a brief overview. So thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions come up, Romy.
So Helen, interestingly, just as a question came in, you answered it by segueing into next slide. So that's fabulous. But I will ask everybody around the, I was going to say around the room, around the country, around the room, if there's any immediate thoughts around how you can be better supported in terms of you yourselves and students, and how that engagement could be facilitated. Those of you that that are already registered, there was a few questions, Helen, about registering, but you've got that up there. So any questions? I mean, I think it's unbelievable, actually, the support that's and the resources. Yeah, because I've seen them. I think it was, we were in the Northwest, Helen, at one stage together, weren't we? And I was like, oh, you know, sort of like shocked at the wealth of these resources. So we've got one here around around more remote events, really, that speak specifically to the resources, if that's, you know, if that's possible. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Just so I check my understanding here, so that's more to help people understand how to use the resources and what's available? Yeah,
to get involved. Yeah, so remote events to get involved. Neil, I don't know if, we don't usually recommend sort of unmuting, but just if I'm not captured that correctly, I know we've got a lot of people in the room. Do you want to say something to them?
Previously, obviously, they did like some workshops for like individual schools where it was like a guest speaker from a company. We had one which was really good. So thank you for that, BCS. But it would just be more useful, I think, to have more of them. So showcasing what links BCS has with employers, making that student offer more aware to students as well. But at the same time, linking in those employable skills from what employers want and see, because I know we do it locally with local companies. But I think having that opportunity for bigger companies to showcase it, talk about what they're doing would be really useful, and also help them in terms of long-term recruitment as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Neil. Thank you. Yes, good ideas.
Tony, I know we've got this in the chat, but if you're able to unmute and just quickly put a bit of gloss on Next Gen, that would be really helpful for Helen and everybody.
Yeah, it's no problem. Hello, hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah, so Next Gen, if you've not heard of them, they work with our games animation VFX program, the AIM Award, and they liaise with game studios, animation studios and VFX houses, and they get professionals for those industries to come in and deliver remote masterclasses. And it used to be they do on site, but obviously for COVID, they stopped doing it. Well, they're going to do some more this year, hopefully. But we had about 35 masterclasses online last year, which were really beneficial for our game students. But I just wondered if this kind of RITTech BCS stuff is there something similar in the pipeline, or is it something that could be offered? Because I think that's what we're missing when talking about specialist lecturers and engagement. We've only got at the moment 2 lecturers on the program, so it's getting a little bit samey. So if that's something that could be offered, that'd be fantastic.
No, thank you. Good suggestion. Yeah.
Tony, I like that. It's getting a bit samey. So yeah, it really is a struggle to keep inputting with the interest there, and to keep that program, that bottom left hand corner, as exciting and challenging as possible. Have we got anything else for Helen at the moment? Please do put stuff, so she, in the chat as we go along, because we will pick them up. Okay, that's brilliant. Please do take a look at those resources. Please do register. They are really, really good and exceptionally helpful there. So what I'm going to do now is we're just heading up for 12 minutes past 10 on mine. I'm going to give us a just 5 minutes. We'll have a 10 minutes later, but well, 7 minutes actually, just to stand up, stretch, get a cup of tea, give me a chance to segue into Jane's slide from NCFE. Great morning so far, great input from yourselves, guys. So if we can be ready to start at 20 past 10 sharp, please, that will give you just over 5 minutes for yeah, so just a reminder there, talk to each other as well as to us, keep an eye on the chat. So I'm going to hand over to James. Absolutely delighted that James has been able to join us here, who's NCFE sector manager there, who's going to talk through curriculum delivery, and joined by my subject specialist as well. So can we swiftly go through that, James? I'm hoping you're with us. Can I go over to you?
I am, yes, of course. So, good morning, everyone. As explained, my name is James Lane. I'm the Sector Manager for Digital Creative and Design here at the charity and awarding organisation NCFE. I'm also joined by David, who you'll hear from in a second. Just by way of a background, I started in this sector itself. So I come from originally EDS, Electronic Data Systems, went on to become Hewlett-Packard, and ultimately DXE Technologies. And I ran North American Training Solutions out of the headquarters in Dallas, which afforded me an amazing opportunity to get involved with companies like IBM, Google, and Twitter. I was also partly responsible for the beta program for Windows Vista, so I'll go ahead and apologize for that at this point. But moving swiftly on to avoid talking any more about that. So on the next slide, here's what we're going to be looking at today. So we've got the route pathways and occupational specialisms that we're going to explain a little bit more about. We're going to take a look at the assessments and grading. We're going to touch on that all-important industry placement and look at, David's going to talk to you about some delivery and resources. And we're going to look a bit more in detail about the components and assessments. And then, of course, we're going to be fielding any and all of your questions that come out as a result of this. So some of this you've already heard. So the T-levels, as you know, are a 2-year program aimed at 16 to 19. I think what I really want to focus on here is the fact that it's designed and created by employer panels. And that's really important because the relationship between ourselves and employers has been a component that's weaved throughout this entire delivery mechanism. So you should really feel that this isn't just coming from an awarding organization where we have the metaphorical closed doors. We've done this in partnership, starting with the panels, the T-level panels, and all the way through to the partners that we worked with on delivering this. And you've already heard from Debbie and how she's involved in that. And there's lots of other amazing people that have influenced this from the very design phase through to reviewing, through to validation. And so that's a common thread that's throughout the entire thing. Also on the routes, I just want to draw out that on the T-levels, the progression routes could be employment, they could be higher education, or they could be higher level apprenticeships. And we don't prescribe that in any way. So that's really up to the student as to what the right fit for them is. We aim to ensure that any of those routes are applicable and the student makes that choice for themselves. So we don't really have a view on that, whatever's right really for the student. So on the next slide, there's a couple of questions that we're going to be looking at. So we can look at the components of the T-levels, explain a little bit more about what we mean by the route. So we've got the digital T-level, we've got the pathways that we look at NCFE, which is digital support services and digital business services, or DSS and DBS, and then the occupational specialism within that. So I'll explain a bit more about that in a second. We're going to look at the assessment methods within the T-levels, and then we're going to look at how it's graded, and we're going to look at some sample certificate. So on the next slide, this is very similar to the visual you saw right at the beginning. So we've got the T-level program overall, and then as an awarding organization, we're responsible for the technical qualification, or TQ, and that comprises of 2 components mainly, the core and the occupational specialisms. Now, we obviously mainly today we're talking about the industry placements, and that's that bottom left that you heard first thing. But I wanted to sort of just explain a little bit more about how that technical qualification is built, and then I suppose holistically how the overall qualification works, because the industry placement is a criteria of the qualification. So the students can't just learn the content from the core and OS, take the exams, they have to complete these other components as well. And that's really, really important. So let's take a look at the root core. So this is a common approach. All students will take the root core. So whether they're on, regardless of which pathway they're on, DBS or DSS, they'll look at these 12 elements throughout, starting with business context all the way through to tools. Now, if they're on the digital support services pathway, we have an additional pathway core where we break down into a little bit more detail. Now, this results in around about an extra 60 hours in the first year from a GLH perspective, and about 30 minutes extra on the exams. So it's not it's a change, but generally speaking, the students will take the same first year, regardless of the occupational specialism. Now, just building on, I think it was Neil's question, this isn't necessarily hugely relevant to this slide, but it's the only place that I could really think to jump on it. I wanted to sort of just touch on some of the CPD programs that we run. So really kind of focusing on that masterclass element. David recently ran a session on emerging technology that you're all welcome to attend, are completely free of charge. And what we've done is we've kind of taken that out of the core, and we ran a survey for all providers and said, what are the areas that you think you might need a little bit of extra support with? And emerging technology came out of that. So David ran an amazing session. We then checked again as to where can we enhance that, and where can we reach into our partner network. And the solution came up that our partners at Google are going to come in and run 3 training sessions for us on quantum, machine learning and robotics, and they'll run at the beginning of next year. So again, completely free of charge. You're very welcome to join those. So we'll make sure those details are sent out from your account executives. So on the next slide, we'll have a look at the occupational specialist. Sorry.
James, can I just interrupt? Because there is a question relevant to this, and I know we talked about that from an institute, we being the Institute and NCFE perspective, around the coordination with the core and DPDD. So there was just a little bit of assurance wanted about synergies with the core from DSS, DBS and DPDD.
So on DBS and DSS, they are ostensibly the same. So there's not a huge difference, and so we treat it as the same core. As where it marries up with the other pathway, it doesn't, I think, is the short answer. And that's because they were built in isolation. Now, that said, I think because we're approaching a similar end goal, there of course is going to be some overlap. And from our view, when we've taken a look, there's actually quite a healthy amount of overlap. So while they weren't technically designed to run together, there is an opportunity there. And I think we've certainly picked up that conversation with providers in the past. And from NCFE's perspective, we are certainly happy to offer a consultation, in essence, to sort of work through that mapping and see how it can be done. I don't obviously speak for Pearson. However, I've been on calls with them in the past where my counterpart Atif has made the same offer. So I would imagine he'd be very happy to do that, but that's obviously a conversation that should be picked up with Pearson. But they've certainly been keen in the past.
And just Steve, to add to that, the specs have been taken from the same outline content. So that's a good point. And another question from Neil, sorry to jump in, and then I'll stop and move on. CPD events, really impressed that you said that they're open to all and they're free of charge. But are they just for NCFE providers? So we've got some people in the room that might be thinking of taking up a DSS and DBS, that want to know if they can register for your events now.
I would have no issue with that. I think that's absolutely fine. The logistics of how it's communicated, I can figure that out with our account exec team and certainly look at that. But yeah, for sure. I mean, we are ostensibly taking it from a charitable perspective. We're an education charity, and knowledge is for all. So I'm not looking to restrict that in any way. So I'm sure we can open up. That's
great. Okay, so I'll move us on then.
Brilliant. Okay, so these are the performance outcomes that we're looking at for the digital support services occupational specialism. So in DSS, we have digital infrastructure, network cabling, and digital support. So I suppose I'll just check. I'm sure these slides are provided to you. I'm getting a nod. Yeah, brilliant. So I won't go through these verbatim, but these are for you to check out if you haven't already seen them. And on the next slide, we break down the PO for DBS pathway and data technician. So just have a quick look at those. Fantastic. So they're for you to absorb at your leisure. I'm certainly willing to pick up any conversations. We have a great provider support team that can give you a curriculum consultation one-to-one. Myself and David can pick up that as well, certainly from a subject specialist and a sector specialist perspective. So, but this is essentially how it breaks down. We want to showcase that and exactly what we're focusing on. So if we jump into assessment, in the core, we've got 2 papers, paper A, paper B, and we also the employer set project. So again, just picking up on that question that was before, I think it was a really interesting question, and it's certainly something we've had in the past. I just want to be clear from an awarding organization's perspective that technically speaking, NCFE would set these ESPs and correspondingly Pearson would set theirs. However, we both work with employers so closely, it wouldn't come from us from an internal perspective, it would be a partnership. So just for example, if it was something like network cabling, we may partner with someone like Openreach to set that project, but that project would be set centrally as an awarding organization to ensure that all students take the same ESP, to ensure consistency. So that's really important for us to ensure that there's no difference, there's no disadvantagement in there at all. And I think because of the word employer coming in there, it sometimes looks like the employer that is also connected to industry placement might be the employer that sets the project, and that's not the case. Because if it were, we would have literally thousands of students doing thousands of employer set projects, and certainly just being a little bit inward facing, we wouldn't have the capacity to mark those. So it's really important that it's one and everyone's doing the same thing. Now, just spinning off on that briefly, because I mentioned network cabling, when we set the employer set project, we found that there's enough overlap between network cabling and digital infrastructure. So we actually set the same ESP for both of those occupational specialisms. So we got our grading in the first year, we're looking at A star to E, and then we swap to a distinction, merit and pass model in the second year, and also the assessment method changes to synoptic in the second year. So we're really focusing on those practical skills, how they can be demonstrated. So it's a real blend. It is all moderated and assessed by us, but again, it's a real partnership. I really want to stress that, because we've got some amazing support from employers that have holistically weaved out this entire qualification. So it goes through a lot of rigor internally and externally. And if you haven't yet seen the sample assessment materials, the SAMs, do take a look at those. They're available on the Qual Hub website. And we are really excited about these assessments. So certainly how they're graded is shown on here. If you swap to the next one, you start to see sort of a weighting assigned to this. And this is also an important point that's already kind of been touched on with regard to UCAS points. So it's just on the next slide. If the student gets a distinction star at T level, we're looking at that to be the equivalent to 3 A stars at A level. So it carries 168 UCAS points. Now, this is a useful point to touch on HE engagement, or specifically HE acceptance. So I know we touched on this with previous speakers, but we do a lot of work with universities to ensure that these qualifications are accepted. It is building all the time. We are seeing specific interest, and yes, we certainly do look at the Russell Group, and we're looking at all institutions nationally to ensure, and further to ensure that the acceptance is there, because these are rigorous qualifications. They are definitely not overly simplified. There's a lot of weight to this, and I think if we look at from a GLH perspective, around 1,200 hours, if we look at the UCAS carry 168, yes, it's equivalent to 3 A levels, but you've got to remember that 3 A levels, you're dividing your time between different subjects, whereas the T level focusing on one subject, there's a lot of weight associated to that, so there's a lot of depth. So as we're picking up the conversations, and we're finding it's really useful to have those conversations one-to-one with universities, though we have worked with Helloa and Neon and similar organizations to kind of have a broad appeal. When we pick it up one-to-one, we're finding that actually when we showcase what the spec looks like, when we showcase the rigorous effort that we've gone through, there's a real excitement to it, because historically for something like some of the universities, say data science degree programs, there's an expectation that they should have an A-level maths. But actually when we crack that nut open, we're asking the question, well, what is it about A-level maths that you feel is essential? And have you looked at what we've included with mathematics within the OS? And the answer is often coming back as actually it's much better than we thought. We just have always wanted A-level maths. But when you peel over that onion, there's not really a good sort of platform behind it. It's already in the OS. So we're starting to see that turn. So on the next slide, we've got the example certificate. These are just samples for obvious reasons. This is all controlled by the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, or IFATE. but they've allowed us to show these. So we've got, this is what an example certificate may look like for a student that has completed their qualification. And on the next slide, we have one for essentially someone who has not completed all elements, and this will be a statement of achievement. So it's just a breakdown of what they have completed, and then that's up to where they want to take that to ensure that they have some evidence of what they have completed already. So let's take a look at industry work placements, because that's the hot topic.
Can I just interrupt you, James?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, there's a question, but also I just wanted to support James in the comment there about engagement with HEI. The department has got a specific team that is engaging with HEI. They have got a dedicated team. So just be aware that those, those assurances are there. Another question specifically for you, James, is around grades A star to E. I know that there is some, I was going to say confusion in the sector. I don't know if it's that, but just explain that core A star to E, and then the OS distinction down to pass, and then the combined grade again. Please, can you explain that again? Yeah. Yeah.
So they're assessed separately, and so we get the letter grading in the first, and then we have the distinction overall. There's a matrix that I'm sure we can share. I don't think there's anything secret behind that as to how that's mapped out, but essentially it's aggregated. And there are certain components that we look at within assessment that must be completed, and there's others that can be mopped up essentially. So you can come out with a solid grade, even though you might not perform as well as we'd hope in one of the exams. But I'll share that matrix as to how we actually calculate that, because I think that showcases it wonderfully.
Yeah.
So for the industry placements, as I mentioned, it is mandatory, so they have to complete it. It is led by yourselves, but it's managed by IFATE. However, what I found is, because I keep stressing this employer relationships that we've got, and the tight collaboration that we've seen weave out throughout this program, what we have found is, for certain circumstances, we're happy to facilitate any introductions between employers. So I saw in the chat earlier questions around local employers. I really want to stress that, yes, we've worked with the IBMs and the BTs, and that's great. I'm not taking anything away from it. It's great to have their involvement, but we get just as much, if not arguably more, insight and different perspective from working with maybe a sole trader or a micro business based in the Southwest. It doesn't matter to us as long as we have the robust and breadth input. So we've got really good connections with all sizes and all geography and all occupational specialisms of employers. So if we can facilitate anything, if you're looking to engage with local employers, then our account exec team work in regions, and certainly I'm happy to signpost and make introductions. It's not something we are able to facilitate directly. We don't manage the industry placement part of it, but if we can support it, then we'll happily add any weight and support behind that wherever is possible. The third point really about the valuable opportunity, this is worth stressing, because it's got to be a meaningful placement. And what we're looking to move away from here is the historical concept of work experience, where maybe you spend a week or two, and I suppose the cliche is that you just become really good at making tea. That's not what we're looking for. It's got to be related to the occupational specialisms. It's got to map to something meaningful. It's got to be relevant. How the employer and yourselves decide to break that down is very much up to you. You heard about block placements or linear. I think there's arguments to be made for both. When they start, again, is up to you. I think David might be talking to you a little bit more about this in a second, but just to echo, I think what you heard from Debbie, you probably don't want to put them out straight away, because they're not necessarily going to get as much value out of that. But once they start learning those skills, they can certainly be put onto a placement and get a lot of meaning out of it. There's been it is a minimum of 315 hours for the DBS and DSS pathways. We don't have any enhancement to those hours like you might see in education and childcare, for example, but there has recently been adjustments made. For example, that 25% can now be done for wave 2 digital off the job, which I suppose this is just James's opinion. I think is a really good change, and I'd like to see that maybe sort of be continued in some fashion, because within the digital sector, we do support remote working quite aggressively. So I think there's lots of value being on site, but there's equally a really good reflection of the work placement being done remotely. So that's something I think you should look at. And there's also some time-based grants available, I think part of CDF, that for Wave 2 providers, you're able to get some support for employers to cover some of those costs that are associated to taking on a student. So I should also mention this, of course, they can be taken outside of the timetable, so they can be conducted whenever is suitable, obviously bearing in mind any kind of safeguarding restrictions, but essentially it's about working with the employer and finding what works really well for them, so they're happy and confident about offering these placements. But they are an absolutely meaningful part of the overall T-level. So I'll just pause there because I'm about to hand over to David. But if there's any specific questions for me, then I can take those now.
So just to say, we've got some questions on flexibilities. We can have a look at that guidance just quickly later. But also a note, James, and I don't know if, I mean, I know this isn't really sort of NCFE's remit, but have you seen any shift in the work, you know, sort of like the working pattern from digital to remote? There's just some interest there about how the providers are going to manage that shift.
So well, I don't think we've seen anything directly yet, but from a few providers that we kind of just holistically pick up that conversation, I think there's a relief associated to this, because like I say, it's that blend. So the presence of the student on site is absolutely useful, but equally there's work that we've done remotely. So I think there's an appetite to see this change, and I would expect it to be result in more employers being open to the concept of a placement. It's a significant commitment. We have to remember that from the employer's perspective. Conceptually, it's a long period of time. And I think all of us that have come from any kind of business background, if any of us have offered placements in the past, you know that it's just not as simple, and it shouldn't be phrased as you're just going to get some free resource. It's not as simple as that. It costs a lot of money, literally and figuratively, for the employer to take on a placement. So I think having that in the back of our minds helps us to have a better conversation with employers. But I think all of the people that I've talked to, there's definitely an appetite for this. We just need to figure out some logistics. So recently there's a company that works on government contracts, and the reality is they just couldn't get clearance for the students. And so that's an obstacle that we're supporting them to overcome as to what they could do, how they could be work on the peripheral for projects, and that way maintain their 315 hours, because previously they were only willing to take them for 2 weeks, which of course is not going to meet the criteria. You can split that placement across a couple of different employers, but 2 weeks is not going to cut it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So just as we hand over to David, just to point out that those flexibilities are just for the couple of years at the moment, but do make your voices heard, because let's gather some sort of like evidence base to say that this is a success. Okay, am I okay to go on to David now, James?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, James. So, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm the digital subject specialist at NCFE. I've on NCFE for it's about 4 months now. Prior to that, I worked in a large FE college for over 20 years. Curriculum manager over FE, HE and apprenticeships. As part of that, we was also one of the pilot colleges for T-levels. Quite involved with the development of the T-levels as we're going along. So I kind of appreciate some of the challenges and maybe apprehension people have when we're looking at this. I think it was good to hear some of the comments from Debbie this morning. I think some of the things she mentioned, you'll see there's an alignment in the things that I'm going to be covering over this presentation. In fact, I think a lot of the presentation I'm going through, we've probably spoke about quite a lot of it before we even get into it. Over the first few slides, we're going to look at the following in a bit more detail, maybe answer a few questions that you might have about GLH on the digital T levels. I know that equates to the total qualification hours. Look at a few examples of what delivery could be like in year 1 and year 2. A brief look at what week 1 delivery could look like, and give you an overview of some of the resources that you can find available to support you with the delivery of the programme from NCFE. Talk about the GLH. Obviously, we're talking about hours that students participate in the educational training that's in guidance by the tutor, and that includes all your assessment time. So it'll break down into the GLH for delivery, the GLH for the assessment under guided learning hours, and then of course we also include the total qualification learning, and that's the hours that you'll spend with the students, or the students will spend where they're working on things like homework tasks and things that will help embed the knowledge. So looking at the programme overall, if we look at just the digital support services, the core component works out around about 584 GLH for delivery. The assessment is just over 16.5 hours, which means year 1, we're putting aside around about 600 GLH delivery just for the technical qualification. And if we go into year 2, it's the same kind of approach. Year 2, the slight difference in specialisms, and that's the timescale of the final assessment. For example, the network cabling pathway has got a 31-hour assessment, where the digital support's got 34 hours. But either way, when you add it, equates to roughly 600 hours total guided learning hours for year 1 and year 2, and that's just for the technical qualification elements of the T-level programme. It doesn't include your additional components that you'd have as part of your study programme. You have to excuse me, I think I'm starting with a cold if I keep coughing. Students taking the digital support services, there is different pathways, but they can only take one of the occupational specialism components, which they must choose. And again, that can be chosen by the centre to suit your students. So if we break it down, we're roughly looking at around about 16 hours per week, depending on how many weeks you're delivering across, of technical delivery. Is the core components are broken into 12 topics, which James has already mentioned, and this allows flexibility about the way providers can choose to deliver the programme. You know, there's no set method, so it's more of a holistic approach that you can decide to adapt, and you know, you can base your own delivery teams, how it fits in with your placements, and of course how it works best for your students. So plenty of opportunities to use your practical skills and use that to support the delivery of the theory. I think I remember there was a young lecturer started teaching for us, and he'd completed his computer science degree. He ended up with a first class honours, and I sat in with him when he taught his first session to some adult students, and his knowledge of networking was absolutely incredible. You know, at the end of the sessions, one of the students came over to him to thank him for the session. He said how fantastic it was, how much he'd enjoyed it. And then he pointed over at the rack and he said to the tutor, so which one of those is the switch and which is the router? And I think that's when reality sunk in. The tutor had learnt everything just from a textbook. He'd never actually seen a router, and he just for a minute. And, you know, he was absolutely fantastic at explaining the theory, but he hadn't got that practical experience. And for me, I mean, that's what we talk about when we're saying there's plenty of opportunities for practical skills. It's not always about having loads of equipment available, but when you're delivering the networking topics, use practical simulations in things like Packet Tracer, and then use hands-on with the equipment you do have for smaller tasks. You know, make use of the free resources that are available to support students while studying these topics. Next slide, please.
Sorry, James, you're in and out. I was just wondering there if I'm keeping up with you with slides.
So looking at an indicative timetable, and said, you know, I've spoke to different providers and ways they're structuring the programme. One example, as we said, we'd recommend, first of all, you know, thinking about when your employer set project dates are and when the exams are. where the resit opportunities are, and kind of put that in your calendar and work backwards from that. 4 components could be delivered between September and May. So that prepares them for taking the ESP and the exam over the May-June period. Over that May, June, July, it then gives the opportunity for starting to get some of the occupational standards delivered. So that's running alongside the exams as it's going through, and you can take that through into that July period. Placement, you know, it can be run at any time over that 2 years. Same as Debbie mentioned, you know, we'd recommend not running it 2 months, because the students really do need to gain some of those practical skills first, and also those workplace skills prior to the placement starting. You know, if we're trying to build up a good reputation working with those employers, then we need to make sure that students have got those basic skills when we're putting them in place, so that we know that we're forging that good relationship. And I've spoke to different ways, you know, it could be block mode how we deliver it, you know, and if you're going for a block mode approach, just remember to work around your exam and your ESP periods. It could be 1 day a week, it could be 2 days a week. I think when I was working in the college, we worked with some of the employers, and where we were putting students in apprenticeships, we used a bit of a buy one get one free. So on the day that the apprentices came to us for 1 day, our T-level student went out to the company and worked with them in their place, so that the company was never losing anybody when the apprenticeship was taking place. Next slide, please. So when you structure your program, just think about how you want to approach it. Think about that holistic delivery. You know, there's loads of opportunity in there to combine elements from the core, so you can use practical skills to deliver the core content and the theory. For example, if we talk week 1 delivery above the example I've got on the screen, we could use the first session where we're looking at our 1.2 to look at business context, what a business is, what stakeholders are, how they're involved, the impact they've got on the business. We could then put the students together into small business teams. And this is like Debbie was talking about, having projects. You know, we could put them together into a small group, around 4 or 5 students, and we could keep them in that group working as a small business group. Maybe you could have one group as a software development company, one as a web development, one working with computers. And this way you've got small teams of students that are working together on projects, and you can set challenges and that throughout the program. And to build up a working relationship just with that small group. The ideas, things they can explore, what's involved in running a business. They get that practical hands-on experience. You know, as been mentioned, you could even arrange employers to come in for that first 2 weeks, just to give them a bit of an insight of what's involved about running a business, and how you'd set these courses groups up. In the like the core element of security, and in there you could get them looking at HR, recruitment, sensitive information, sales, profit, and again you could get them linking it back to this little business group they're working in. And we could set group-based tasks for them to think about things like, you know, how much do they want paying, what skills would they need, what cost would be incurred, how many staff they'd need, what they'd need to make to break even. You know, we're teaching the business processes at that stage and giving them a chance to relate it back to their business needs. Or 1.2, and 1.2 is all about having the students work through a PESL. And with that, they could put together a PESL for their business group. And that would get them thinking about what's currently happening in the news, political events, new technologies coming out, etc. And it could be something they revisit that as they go through the programme. They could keep coming back to this PESL to see how it grows based on what's currently happening in the news. You know, one of the key things for digital students is they need to be aware of what's happening. You know, we've got change happening so fast. This gets them exploring things that's going on in the news. And in the afternoon, they could move back onto Root Core 10.1 which looked at accessing information, and they could look at how would they go about securing the business up, how would they go about setting up user groups and passwords, authentication. And by using that approach, students have got the chance to explore how the business operates by applying them core element skills to their own scenario. And I think somebody had put in the chat about using specialist tutors to teach just that point. You know, as long as all the tutors are working together on these projects, it gives the tutors chance to feed it back in to one large project. As the program evolves, you could even get them using things like Packet Tracer to set up a business in a simulation, so that they could look at what would be involved in putting the infrastructure in place, getting all the equipment ready, and that then starts looking at firewalls, IP addresses, routers, switches, cables. You know, it's endless where we could go with it. And the good thing about that is that would feed into like a morning session where you could start preparing them for the ESP, again using scenarios and activities. And at that point, we're kind of embedding the core skills here and showing how they could apply them to not only industry, but to these scenarios. So you're preparing them for dealing with these problem-based scenarios. So you're preparing them for going out into industry and for how they deal when the ESP comes through. On there, whether your days set aside for study days, industry placement days, 2 days block set aside for placement, and fitting in things like tutorial, pastoral, English, maths, that type of thing. So over the next few slides, I wanted to look at some of the resources that we've got available to support for the delivery. On Hub site we've got, you can access things like the specifications. We've put a verb document, and that provides additional guidance on the language that's used in the T-level qualification specs and also in the assessment materials. There's also specimen core papers, specimen marking schemes, there's ESP provider guidance, ESP briefs and ESP marking schemes, and there's the same kind of resources for each of the specialisms and the synoptic projects. And finally, we've got on there some exemplification materials for all of the pathways, including both pass examples and distinction materials, so you've got clear examples of what they're working towards. So a few slides, I'll just look at some of the resources in a little more detail. First of all, we've produced sample schemes of work and going into root core elements. All of these are then aligned to the core skills, and we identify in this where the link with other root core elements. And again, you know, you might find other links that you could bring in yourself. This is just giving you some kind of guidance how you can pull it all together. And even though the schemes of work we produce might follow like a linear type approach, it means that you can use these, adapt them, take elements from them, and use them to support your own holistic delivery style. Please. Also produced a range of essential and additional resources. And again, when we've been creating these, we've worked with employers as well as working with lecturers. Essential resources are all free resources, and you can use these. They're all aligned to many of the core elements, and they all include things like interactive e-learning resources. There's session plans for each of the resource. If activity sheets, usually they're interactive PDFs that they're within your session. Also further home study tasks, so you like build up that formative assessment. And then we've created a range of additional resources which are paid resources, and with further e-learning activities, so they use a similar style to the free ones, but go into detail about different topics. With these, we've also created a tutor delivery guide and activity sheets. On screen, when it changes in a minute. That was the starting page of one of the learning resources. So all the resources we've developed follow the same kind of approach, where they're all interactive. Click on start and work through as you're going through. Next slide, please. And as you work through the resources, you'll see they all include interactive elements that allow the students or the tutors, depending on how you decide to use them, explore these topics in a little more detail. They also include assessment activities that allow students to formatively assess their own understanding of a topic. And these could be used as independent resources that the students can work through in self-study sessions, or they could be part of your classroom activities, and they could be used to consolidate understanding of particular topics. Are these the paid ones? That's one of the free resources that's on the screen at the moment. The paid ones and the free ones look identical. They just cover different topics, or maybe in more depth about a particular topic.
And can we just ask if those paid ones are available now, if they're ready for uptake now, David?
All the free ones out at the moment, and we're in the process of publishing a lot of the paid ones at the moment.
Okay. Also, David, just to say, I'm really struggling with, I think your Wi-Fi is in and out.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so do I need to move on?
Yeah, next slide, please. And as mentioned, all the resources include activity sheets. These are all usually interactive PDFs, and these all follow the e-learning resource materials. So when there's an activity in the e-learning resource, we have a sheet that they can then go out and participate and work in. These might be individual activities, they could be group-based tasks, they could be things where they're gathering their own notes and gathering evidence, or research-based tasks. And they're all there to like kind of help embed, extend and consolidate that learning. And they can be used either alongside the e-learning resource, or you'll find there are activities that make sense a lot of the time that you can just take these interactive PDFs and use them within your own teaching if you didn't want to use the e-learning resource itself. Slide, please. The additional resources, these are the paid ones. We've also created the tutor delivery guides, and these have been developed so that you can use them as part of a blended learning solution. They've been developed as a flexible solution to allow tutors to then look at them and choose how they use them. The guidance will provide an overview, an explanation of the activities, and then you could think about how you can embed them into your own delivery plan if you didn't want to use the e-learning resource just as a run-through process. So moving away from the resources, we just look at some of the opportunities that's available for the practical work within the T-level, and briefly look at root content across the T-levels and consider some of the approaches that could be utilised for delivery. Next slide, please. T-level, there's various T-level, there's various opportunities to embed practical skills, and I've just picked out a few examples on the board. We could have students developing and using diagrams and flow diagrams as part of Root Core 3.3. Within Core 3.6, we could have them working with data visualization. You might have Microsoft Power BI licenses that you could use. But take advantage of Tableau. Tableau offers a 1-year free license for students. And if you didn't want to go to that extreme, or you had struggle getting these things installed on your network, then you could use some of the tools embedded in Excel to kind of run through some of the visualization you need. In Root Core 4.2, students can explore tools for problem solving and look at things like flowcharts and pseudocode. And in 5.2, they could start to work with different types and applications and networks. And as mentioned, if you don't have networking resources like routers and switches available, you could use Packet Tracer, which is absolutely fantastic for simulating that network environment and then making use of the equipment for smaller tasks. In 5.4, we could expand on the components and benefits of virtual learning computing systems. And at that stage, you could use VirtualBox, which is free for setting up all your virtual machines. Or you could make use of Microsoft's Azure for students, and they provide a 12 months free license for students. When you're looking at things like emerging technologies as part of the root core, you know, make use of things like Google's interactive lab environment, or you can access IBM's quantum computer. You can have students using quantum computing to run through some activities. It is very programming based, but again, there's some excellent tutorials that lets them work through examples they can go on there. You could use drone simulations to let students explore and fly drone challenges, or if your health and safety permitted, maybe flying real drones. And again, that builds into that area of emerging technologies. Finally, when looking at project planning for 9.3, use online tools like Trello, which allows you to bring in Kanban and plan your projects. You know, you could introduce students to this at an early stage, get them to manage their own group activities through it, and then everything they do there is time-stamped. They can allocate tasks to team members, they can upload and attach documents, and they can include peer feedback. It's absolutely a fantastic resource for managing teamwork. Other things out there that we can use, collaborative tools that's available for building some of your core skills, such as Flipgrid, that lets you do video recording, group-based discussions and student reflections. Slide, please. Well, as we've mentioned, there isn't one size fits all. It's finding a solution that works best for you and for your students. The schemes of work we provide might suggest a linear approach, but providers are adapting these to make this more holistic overall. And if you've got learners on different digital T levels, you can combine some of the root level components to get that consistency across groups. We recommend that you work through the specifications to see how well they all link together and look at where the elements cross over and link through, because that lets you then work with the tutors about who's delivering which element and how it's being built into the group work. And as we've already talked about, you could combine modules and use a business approach to deliver the core. The advantage of this is it introduces a little bit of gamification into your delivery, as you can have the businesses competing. You know, you could have them doing things like costing up and seeing who comes up with the best cost, or identifying the best ideal storage solution for a scenario, or looking at how you could adapt an existing business into a virtualized solution. You know, there's loads of ideas out there, and we spoke to different providers, and you know, some of the ideas that were suggested, somebody had said, why not look at bringing in like a biometric login for a T-level study room? Students could set it up, they could configure it, they could manage the users, or even just having biometric login for your computers. You know, they're not expensive devices. It's not something that is difficult to bring in, but it's something that the students could get the experience of how it works and how it's configured. Having a dedicated net lab, one dedicated room that's off the college network. You know, your students could take control of setting up the room, maybe building the computers, configuring the computers, installing the software on there, setting up the network, configuring users. You could even use caddies in there so they could swap over to different operating systems quite easily, or having it so that they can just install from an image at the start of a session. Our own IT department working as the employer for them, so the report, the room secure and the setting it up right. I know logistics might be challenging working with that, and I know it's in that college environment, it's not always the easiest to set out, but kind of taking a step back and thinking of how you're going to approach this T level as a whole lets you come up with different opportunities, experiences you could offer this with. But when you're looking at the data analytics, use data that's relevant to students. Why not have the students play a game, something like Mario Kart? They can then collect the data such as the gamer name, age, experience, scores, challenges, characters, vehicles, track, whatever. And from that, they could analyse the data, get them to identify who the best player is, what the factors that led to it. Did they win were they the best player because of the cart they used, for example? And they could consider all the data then. What could they do to make it better? How by adapting the data, it changes the results. What data did they collect? Was it qualitative, quantitative? How have they collected the data? Do they need it all? And they can put that into virtualization software. So the building charts, you can build challenges around this. And then they could look at how things change. So you might, if you did this as small group activities, you might find different groups identify the best player as a different person, a different mechanism for calculating the best data. But all the time we're using data that the student can relate to. And I think that's the key thing. Application and experience are the main thing. And if we can learn the theory through that, it's a great way for reinforcing it. Next slide. As James mentioned, the program's been developed with a modular approach. The root core consists of 12 topics. And in the case of sports services, that's got the further enhancements of the additional 3 topics, the pathway core. And using this approach, we've got that holistic based delivery. And through that core, your students get the chance to explore how digital technologies impact the business and market environment. They get an awareness of ethical, social, legal and moral implications. Through the use of data in software design, they can use digital technologies to analyse and solve problems, such as physical, virtual and cloud environments. And all the time they're thinking about privacy and confidentiality. They can gain experience in planning a project, exploring the tools that they use for that, security and testing. And they all get to explore these roles within the different sectors so they understand what's relevant to the job roles they're going into, the communication skills that are required, and working with different stakeholders. And at the same time, they're looking at fault analysis, troubleshooting, problem solving. So overall, it's really opening them up to what's involved for working in that digital sector. Slide, please. As well as that, we've also got things like the core skills and the general competencies, and how we're looking at assessing both the core skills and the occupational, general competencies as part of the main programme. Slide, please. As we mentioned, we've got this employer set project, and it requires the students to apply and contextualise the core knowledge through demonstration of the 4 core skills that's on the screen there. And parameters have been provided for each of the skill in order to define what students must be able to do to demonstrate that they satisfy these requirements as part of that ESP. So for example, if we looked at just CS1, which I've got on the screen there, as part of CS1, which is all communication focused, they've got to be able to look at identifying stakeholders' requirements, identifying key factors to determine the scope of communication when they're meeting with stakeholders. They've got to be able to apply the identified requirements for the communication, and finally, they've got to be able to record and document it. And if we think about that realistically, that's the core elements that we're kind of encouraging students to do with this ASP. When they're looking at that project, they're looking at can they articulate what's involved with it and how would they deal with different stakeholders. And if you go through the specification, it provides guidance on how these core skills can be embedded and where they can be embedded. So that's an example on the board, how it can be embedded into those root core elements. It becomes a natural part of your delivery. Next slide. The embedded general competencies further ensure that holistic based approach. There's activities there that can support your delivery mechanism that allows them to easily demonstrate these skills. And all the time it's about preparing them for in the workplace. So, you know, as you're going through them competencies, they're all mapped through against the core skills, and they're also mapped through against the standards. Next slide, please. As James already mentioned, the written exams are graded A star to E. There's 2 written exams, and these consist of a combination of multi-choice questions, short answers, and extended writing. So the students need to be prepared to demonstrate their understanding while going into detail about it. They need to be able to justify their answers and explain this technologically accurately. Students need to be able to identify something, describe it, and then explain why. For example, they might need to describe one way in which something might have a negative effect, and then explain why it's got the negative effect. So it's important that we're preparing students to be comfortable about discussing things in detail and really justifying their answers. Do they know why they're saying something? Paper A consists of 3 sections, and you can see on the board where it links through to the root core. And paper B has 4 sections for the digital support service pathway, but 3 sections for the DBS pathway. And there is an opportunity for students to retake the core component assessments to improve the marks if they wanted to. And this includes both the exam and the ESP. And as the core component written exam is made up of 2 parts, if a student wants to retake the written exam, they'd have to retake both exam papers because it's got to be from the same series. No limit to the number of retakes a student can complete. However, any retake must be completed within 2 years after completion of the T-level programme. Please. The employer set project, as we said, this is externally set. It's developed in conjunction with employers. So they go through and they determine what's going in this project. And the purpose of this project is to ensure students have the opportunity to apply the core knowledge and skills to develop a substantial piece of work based around this employer set brief. Must demonstrate the core skills, and it's round about a 12-hour assessment, and it's broken up into 4 time tasks. So overall, there's 5 aims of that assessment. So they've got to be able to plan, they've got to be able to apply core knowledge, select relevant techniques and resources, use English, maths and digital skills, and realise a project outcome. Then there's two assessment opportunities per year for this. So one's in the summertime around that May, June time, and the other's in autumn around November or December. And as we just mentioned, the employer set project comprises of 4 tasks, around about a 12-hour period, and it's broken up into 4 elements, each allocated their own time scale. First of all, the students will create and troubleshoot and create a test plan. Then they'll engage with stakeholders. They'll prepare a proposal to address clients' needs and finish off by preparing a review, maybe a satisfaction survey. So it all follows on quite well. Next slide, please. The Synoptic project for the digital support services in this case comprises of task-based assessments. For example, if we just took the digital infrastructure, for example, it's got a total assessment time of 24.5 hours, and that's broken across 3 tasks. So a task 1 is around about 13 hours, task 2 about 6, and task 3 the remainder. And 1 assessment opportunity per year for this. And as mentioned, there's sample assessment materials that can be found on the qualification page on the NCFE website that give examples of how these are set up and structured. Slide, please. The digital business services, because obviously they've got the extra outcomes in there because they've not done the pathway part, got 4 assessment tasks over a 29-hour period, and it's conducted in exactly the same way. 4 tasks each allocated a small time scale that all carry on and continue through. slide, please. Then finally, for working out the grade, as we said, the matrix we've got on the board there shows the overall qualification grade when both of the components are combined. For example, if a student has achieved a C grade in the component, and then they achieved a merit grade for the occupational, you go across the C, down the merit, and it would give them a merit overall for the grade. So it's a quick way to be able to calculate where they fall. And this accounts for how James mentioned earlier, you know, a student might not do as well in the core component, but do fantastic in the occupational specialism, and gives them chance to bring their marks back up there. Please, you'll be pleased to know, I think we're getting towards the end. At that point, just a few useful links in the links there to the Qual Hub website, where you can download the specifications and sample materials, as we've mentioned. There's also links on there to the T-level provider support. As James mentioned before, we do webinars, so we've already done things linking equality and diversity, working with formative assessment, working with emerging technologies. Again, there's links to where all the webinars are and links to the booking page. And there is a HODA textbook that's due for coming out in 2022. And I think, next slide, I think that concludes it for me. So on that final slide, there is a few lists of contacts there. At the top stage are all the business account managers for any queries that you might have, again, depending on what area you're in. There's links there both for James and for myself, if anybody needs to get in touch with any of us for anything. And finally, at the bottom, there's links to Rachel, who's our provider developer officer, who coordinates all the events and webinars. I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add at that point, James.
I suppose just to put an open offer out there, if you want to be involved in the development, you know, we are still working on live assessments. There's an opportunity to get involved in that. And the T-level program overall across all awarding organizations, it runs on a cycle of redevelopment constantly. So even though the current delivery is out there in the wild, as it were, we will be starting to look at it again in the not too distant future. So there's a really good opportunity for any providers who want to get involved. You don't actually have to be a current approved provider. So if it's just something that's on your radar and you're thinking about it, being involved at that early stage does give you slightly earlier insight or sight, I suppose, of the documents and the changes that we're planning. So if that's something that your organisation would like to be involved in, reach out to us. We'd love to have you.
Okay, I'm just going to pick up one point. It's a technical question around UMS weighting, and James, I don't know if you'll have the answer without looking under the bonnet, and we might not anyway if we've not got access to Pearson UMS data, but it's just the grade matrix appears to be we're just sort of like marrying up the NCFE one with the Pearson one. And there was a question around how that doesn't seem to appear to be the same. James, would we have to compare UMS data for that?
Yes, I don't have an answer for that right now. If I can look into that and come back to you.
Yeah, I thought that would be the case, but Neil, I just wanted to acknowledge that that we'd got that. So just to take any questions there whilst we've got James and David online. If not, it's okay if you think about them later, just get them in the chat. We have got the offer from James to review the transcript, so that will be fabulous. But just those of you that asked earlier about the if you've got students right across all three pathways there, you will notice those fab resources that were referred to here, and teaching application there around data, emerging technologies, planning, programming. Those do go right across the whole of the route, whichever spec that you're teaching. So So that's, you know, sort of do take advantage of what NCFE are offering here. And we've got lots of thank yous in the chat. And also a brilliant recognition of the slides there, actually. Okay, so what we'll do now is it's 25 past. I did promise you 5 minutes stretch and all the rest of it. We'll come back at 1:30, yeah, and then we'll wrap up. We'll have a look at the DFE guidance, the industry placement site and objectives, and then we'll do a final wrap up. There's some questions there coming in, James, for you and David, just to send through, but that will be fabulous. So if we can have a quick stretch and come back here at 1:30, that would be fabulous. Okay, and then we'll wrap up. So thanks, everyone. With us? Yeah, I'm hoping that Abby's back with us now. In a strange fashion, we're going to we've got an exit poll that we want to launch now. I know you haven't exited yet, but that's just so that we can process the data in the background. Abby, will you be able to launch that without the slides up? Yeah, okay, right, so we're going to, so it's a very simple exit poll, not too onerous, but we'd be very grateful for some immediate feedback. We're just going to go into the industry placement DFE guidance now, but we want to collect this data now, please. And then we can process it and send that off to ourselves with the register and everything. Yeah, at the end. That's brilliant. Thank you. And Abby's going to give me the thumbs up when she thinks everybody is polled.
Yeah, no problem. Just coming in thick and fast, actually, so it should be
great. What else? So as we go into, so I'm just going to segue into sharing my screen, but not slides. I'm going to work without slides and just go straight into the DFE website. So you've got that link there. It's the same link that Debbie gave you right at the beginning of the session. And really what I wanted to do was, when we're looking at these industry placement templates, was to emphasize James's point about meaningful placements and how the employers can break down the curriculum there and the conversations and support your conversations that you have with them or your dedicated team, as Debbie said, in terms of making those placements meaningful and supporting the technical knowledge and skills there. Are we okay, Debbie? Can I go ahead? Yeah, I can go ahead.
We're at 61% of participants have answered the poll. It might be that people just aren't back at the computers yet, but it has stayed around 34 for a while. Do you want me to close the poll for now?
Or can I?
You should still be able to share your screen though.
Okay, right, I'll minimise that. and then I'll go. Right, so I'm just going to move into bottom here, share screen. Okay, right, so hopefully you can all see. Abby, will you nod? Yeah, have I got that right? Okay, right. Okay, so some of you would have seen this before. I wanted to take you to the DFE support side, just so that you can find your way around it and just talk you through, and then we'll go straight into the templates, really just a 10 minutes overview. So that delivery guidance, for those of you that haven't seen it, that gives all that really detailed information that you need. There's absolutely everything in there. Actually, it's not too onerous to say that it's government documents, and Debbie referred to that right at the beginning as well. So here in this one, and then I'll come out of it, they're your temporary flexibilities. Now remember, they're for 2020 and 2021 students only. So those of you that have started already, and then I'll come back out of this, just going to give you a little snapshot there of, oops, sorry, little snapshot there of wave ones up to 40% can be undertaken remotely, and then for wave 2 up to 25%. So just in case, some of you will be working with that, some of you won't be, but the reason why I've shared it is just in case, to be aware of that and you don't get confused, but also for, you know, sort of if you are lobbying for that to continue. So when you get to the main website, scroll all the way down, and I'm just going to do this slowly so that you can pause and see the delivery guidance there, the different models. So one question we had was around, is digital at root level? And I think that was backed up with engineering as well. So yeah, do look at that. So we've got the temporary flexibilities, but if we haven't, and you're not delivering until till next academic year, or even planning to, then have a look at that one as well. And then yeah, we're going to get, oh, that one I'm going to refer to as well, but we're not going to look at it. Progress indicators. So when your students are on industry placement, there is a requirement to monitor progress. So that's progress overall in terms of general feedback, but also specifically on the technical component. So that's around technical skills and the knowledge there. So you will have an obligation to make some sort of judgment as to whether students have made progress. So here we go. We're going all the way down here. You can see which one I visit the most there. And I'm going to have a look at the template objectives. Now you can see that you've got there the whole 3. So you've got business services, you've got DPDD, and you've got DSS there. Now, I want to emphasize that these were written then, so without the specs, okay? So just to bear that in mind. And these are indicative examples. So these are examples only. Move out of that. And I want to have a look at, I'm going to shuffle down to, here you go, this one. Screen across, right? Okay, so just want to talk about templates for 10 minutes then. So digital has its own section, and then you've got each TQ with its own section in between that. Now these are indicative examples only, and you can use them to create your own. So it's not mandatory, but this is set out as good practice. Now you'll see there that this is an arrangement between the employer and and it should be on an individual level for each particular student. Now, you'll find your ways around to make that manageable for you, yourselves and your institution, as to whether you might have some sort of those that you can adapt, etc. But these are just examples only. I'm going to point out that the objective, which is set against that role. Now, this is something that employers worked on with the T-level panels and the departments, because they were really clear that they wanted the students to have a particular role title. So rather than being referred to, and we heard earlier about the work experience student or just the students. So having a role title means that there is something meaningful there, and it makes it exciting, and it maximizes that industry placement opportunity. So the overall objective there, that sets out the purpose an almost scene setting of what the student is doing there. Now, you'll notice there that in this one, you've got to support. And in this case, it's a software development team. But the purpose of the industry placement is to hone skills learned in the classroom, and that's to support the development of threshold competency. Now, you'll note that this one that's been drafted between employer and the student here is that they're going to support members of the team. So this is not an outward facing role, but it's one around building simple software to support the members of the team in-house. So overall objective there. Now, remember, it's one student, one example, and I'm going to keep saying that all the way through. The student, the activities there are to help the student in meeting, and the employers in meeting, that overall objective. And that's when you'll know that whether the student has succeeded, you know, that monitoring progress template that we talked that I referred to earlier. It's to help establish whether those activities have helped the student to meet that overall objective there. So here, there's no need to set out every single activity, but what you've got is key activities. And there you've just got the 3 key activities that are taking place there. So, and they're to help the student to meet their learning goals. And also, you'll note there in brackets the at least once a week, 3rd activity at least twice a week. Now, this is to be a bit realistic, I think, about the fact that we referred to elsewhere, there was a mention about making cups of tea and shuffling papers around, and the need to be flexible. So recognise that, and you yourselves know that employers are really busy. You yourselves know about your own work pattern and what you get, what takes place with students each week. So we're recognising there will be other times when employers are really busy and that students are taken away from that overall junior software assistant role or that overall objective role. But we are saying that we're asking employers to make a commitment for, if this was a 5-day-a-week placement, for at least once a week for the students to get an opportunity to take part in team meetings, to have an opportunity of reviewing software designs for at least once a week. And notice it doesn't say a full day, but to have that regular input there of being able to implement code, which other team members have specified. So there is that realistic sort of acknowledgement there of what is possible for employers to provide, but also is that what will support students in terms of honing their technical skills. And right at the 3rd activity down there was around testing software for user acceptance there, and that's at least twice a week, and that's flexible enough to be as narrow and broad and as complex as to when the student arrives for their industry placement there. So another thing to notice, those of you that are familiar with the outline content, you'll notice that all the terminology here is taken from the outline content, and you'll see a lot of that mirrored in the specifications. So do review these and adapt them in line with the specifications themselves, because as I pointed out, these were published in July 2020. They were written before that, and that was before the specifications were out and available there. So if I go down to learning goals, and you'll notice on the right hand side, you don't have to have that TQ reference, but if you want to reference that in your own planning for where these particular skills surface in the specifications, then you can do. You'll notice there again, when we talk about honing activities, honing skills, so students should have learned something, they should have done something before they go out, if we're talking about honing there. So these goals are split into, and let's see if we can do a split page, yeah, employability skills and technical skills there. And you can see that the employability skills are broken down, and you'll be already able to recognise where the team working appears in the specification. For example, we've got assessing risks you've already heard about in the specification, and designing as well. So these employability skills aren't just something that will appear in the TQ spec, but there'll be transferability skills as well. You'll also be able to see those broken down in specific detail if you go onto the Institute, the IFA website, and you can see there how those employability skills are built up of core skills and behaviours as well. So that's something really important that you might want to go through. Now, remember, these skills aren't externally assessed, but there is an obligation to monitor progress. So students should make progress towards their learning goals. Just going to let you have a look at, so that was mapped against activity 1. You don't have to set yours out in this way, but just see how that follows through from overall. It depends which way around you're looking at this overall objective, narrowing down to activities, and then the specific skills that support the achievement of those activities. So the technical skills for activity 1 there, you've got the opportunity there, and we're asking the employers to provide the opportunities at least once a week for this particular student, the opportunity to be able to interpret and analyse designs, to writing up a design based on user requirements. So getting the feel of, getting the knowledge of, honing those skills that do need to be developed for threshold competence. Now, David talked earlier about certain collaboration tools. So you've got that broad overarching statement there about using collaboration tools. And that is something that we're suggesting could be developed in the learning, in the industry placement, in that practical learning employer environment as well. So there you've got employability skills and you've got technical skills there. I'm going to shuffle down because it's the same pattern throughout there, sort of same format. Employability skills are so important for employers, for when students go out and eventually get employment in meeting that threshold competence. Activity 3. Now this one here, the minimum starting requirements. So this is from the employer perspective. So Debbie's, I can't remember what you called your special team, but the employer team, the industry placement team. So they might go out and say, with employers, you know, sort of, are you expecting students to attend an induction day? And this is what the employers have said that they want students to do. They said that they want students to be undertaking some sort of health and safety and security at work. So health and safety important overall, but that security might involve confidential information there, as well as personal security. So this is what the employers are saying needs to happen as a minimum before students start. The next section on this template, which could be adapted by yourselves for your own purposes there, suggested prior learning. Now, when we saw the model there from David about how the industry placement might be positioned right across the scheme of learning there and the 2-year course, you saw that it didn't start immediately. So and you'll have also heard that there is the requirement for something to have happened for students not to start on day 1 in September, year 1, and that was echoed by Debbie as well. So this is something that employers have said, well, yeah, we'd like them to know a little bit about, in this case, basics of code, SDLC there. You've heard David talk about emerging technology trends. So this is something that has been agreed between the employer and either yourselves as curriculum specialists, or I don't know if we've got any industry placement colleagues in the room, but this is something that the employer was saying, yeah, if they've actually got this in terms of knowledge, and you can see them there, you can see them outlined there. This is what we can provide. We can help them build on that and hone those skills when they come to us for their industry placement, whatever that model is, whether it's 1 day a week or whether it's block. So it's really important to see the industry placement as a synergy between the curriculum, what happens in the classroom, and what actually happens, I'm going to say out on the industry placement, because I know that we've got flexibilities at the moment, and you might want to be able to design something a bit more creative going forward as well. But that's really important, that this should be seen as a continuum and as synergy as well. Notice there, workplace behaviours. There's a typical there, but workplace behaviours needed for the role. And a lot of you will say how, those of you that have already started, that interaction with employers has been so crucial in terms of building up those behaviours, those positive behaviours in terms of punctuality, in terms of initiative, and in terms of team participation. Something in a different environment that students move away from their usual institution, whether that's school, college, whatever environment, to ensure that those technical skills are honed in order for students to achieve threshold competence. So you will see that there are differences in all the examples there, whatever the pathway is. And I'm going to shuffle back up now to the top. Just have a quick look at that data objective there. So this is DBS, the data technician. And you can see it's the same sort of model there. They're given a role title, overarching objective, and typical activities to support the achievement of that overarching objective. Now I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat. That was a whistle-stop tour, but I'm conscious that we're at nearly 5:02.
I think the only question in the chat room really that's come through at the moment is who from the staff in the provider settings is best placed to set learning goals. So for example, work experience staff who are going out to see the employers, or a curriculum specialist or teacher, their tutor. It's just in your opinion who'd be the best person to set those goals.
So I would say that you as curriculum specialists, the curriculum specialists do need to be involved. Now, to make that more manageable, it might be that you say, this is what we will have learned by, and maybe given points in the curriculum. But I do think that that the curriculum specialists ought to be nominating those learning objectives according to given points, but it might not be practical for you to go out. Totally accepted, and I know the convention is that industry placement specialists go out and perhaps negotiate directly with the employer. Hopefully that'll give you a flavour of the sorts of models that are being adopted. Yeah, I'm going to pause there and give a chance for you to come back in with. First of all, I'm just going to say thank you for your sticking with it. We've still got over 50 with us. Yeah, at the moment, different format. Beth's coming in. Beth, we have got 2 minutes. If you want to give a gloss on your slightly different format, then do come in, because it's whatever works for you. A lot of providers do use the platform, actually.
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Super. So yeah, we use Navigate, and we've been using it primarily for our CDF placements prior to this year, when we were running T-levels in 2 areas this year, one of which is digital. So Navigate is great for us because it's all central and we can keep everything in one place, including sort of the learner journey through their journals that they can complete on placement as well. But from the very beginning of interacting with an employer, we can keep all of that information within the platform. So any interactions that we've had with the employer prior to them signing them up for a placement is in Navigate as well. with regards to objectives, that's within the learner profile. We can set those objectives as per that placement. I mentioned earlier as well that we're currently thinking about how to set those objectives. Our placements aren't actually starting until April of next year. So we're currently signing up all of those employers, hopefully getting that underway before the Christmas break, that we have everything signed off and ticked. And then when we come back in January, it really will be that conversation with our curriculum staff to go over those objectives and sit with the students to input those objectives onto their profile for their placement. And then Navigate is great, as I mentioned, being central, that we can upload documents as well. So when we go out on those assessment visits, that we can, we have pro formas that we're putting together as well for those visits that we've used in CDF, and they won't be majorly different for the T-level students. So we will be able to upload those documents into Navigate as well, again, keeping everything central and avoiding sort of losing those really important documents in lots of different files or spreadsheets or anything like that. We're just really keen on making sure everything's in one place.
Great advice there, Beth, and you've got some acknowledgement as well as a thank you in the chat there. I'll just quickly put this up for you in terms of that's what we mean by progress. So I'll let you read that yourselves, but you can see there's the three sort of categories there, and so when Beth talks about assessment, I mean, I don't know what your assessment is, Beth, but it's basically to that level. Have they made a employment? That's a requirement from the department.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so any last minute? Yeah, so we've got some other chat going on there in the background. Abby, I never thought we'd be running out of time actually today, so so that just goes to show what a great program that you put together, and yeah, and also a big thank you to our participants, our colleagues that have led the input today, and for yourselves for keeping the chat going as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Romy, for presenting as well. And yeah, it's been I think people found it really helpful looking through the chat.
So next steps, we are going to upload this onto your Padlet. If you've got any difficulties accessing or knowing where your individual, where your Padlets are for your individual organisations, I'm going to say, please let Abby know. Is that right? Yeah. And yeah, any follow-up questions that you've got, AOC will take them. We'll coordinate with Debbie from Fareham and from NCFE and from Helen as well. So thank you so much for taking part in this session, and we're just on time unless there's any last minute emergency bits of input. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Romy, are you going to send us the slides, please?
They will be uploaded onto Padlet, won't they, Abby?
Yeah, we'll either get them uploaded onto Padlet or we'll email you them out.
How does it work with the Padlet? Sorry.
Pardon, sorry?
How would it work with the Padlet? Is it like a link or?
Yeah, we'll get it uploaded and I'll send you a link through to Padlet, and you'll be able to access it that way as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but Abby, you've got all the delegate contacts, haven't you?
Yeah, so everybody that's been on this meeting today will get everything through. I'm not gonna lie, it may take me a few days for it to be downloaded and edited and everything. So it might be next week before it gets uploaded, but we will get over to you as soon as we can.
I've got lots of useful information to pass on to the team as well. So I'm just going to cascade it to them. The kaggle.com and all that, the links that you send. So that would be a good start because.
Yeah, do you want me to send, if you need it for the team sooner rather than later, would you like me to send you the PowerPoint today so that you've got it?
Yes, then I can pass it on to the team. Actually, that would be great. Thank you so much. Because there are four or five people delivering the session, so it'd be really useful for me to pass it on.
All right, no problem. I should have your email address in the chat,
yeah,
in the registration. So I'll find your name. I'll get that over to you.
Thank you. And hi, Debbie.
Hi.
We go to another